One of the most puzzling aspects of human development is that our emotional growth does not always keep pace with our physical maturation. It's possible to reach the age of 55 externally while still harboring the emotional responses of a child on the inside. In the same way, a person on the threshold of physical adulthood might possess a wisdom far beyond their years, emotionally speaking. This discrepancy between physical and emotional age is a fundamental challenge for many of us, as it requires navigating the world with a mix of strengths and vulnerabilities that don't necessarily align with our chronological age. To better understand both our own and others' emotional development, we can rely on a deceptively simple question. This question cuts to the core of our emotional maturity. When someone we emotionally depend on disappoints us, lets us down, or leaves us feeling uncertain, how do we typically respond? Our answer to this question can reveal a lot about our underlying emotional age and development. There are three primary patterns of response that indicate emotionally immature behavior. By recognizing these tendencies, we can start to grade ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10, according to how often we resort to them. The three patterns are sulking, lashing out in fury, or shutting down and going cold. 1. The tendency to sulk. One common reaction to emotional hurt is to sulk. This means that we become deeply upset, but refuse to articulate the cause of our distress to the person who has hurt us. The pain to our pride feels too overwhelming, and we are often too fragile inside to admit that we've been emotionally wounded. Rather than express our feelings, we might hope, often against all logic, that the other person will somehow understand what they've done wrong, guess what we need, and make amends without us having to utter a word. This reaction resembles that of a young child who has not yet developed the language skills necessary to communicate their discomfort. Just as an infant might wish for a parent to magically understand their needs, we, too, might secretly yearn for an emotional mind reader. 2. The tendency to get furious. Another common reaction is to get extremely, and often disproportionately, angry with the person who has disappointed us. This anger can look powerful and intimidating, but in reality, it hides a profound vulnerability. No one who truly felt secure and in control would need to react with such overwhelming rage. Our anger might make us appear as if we are the ones in control, but it is really an attempt to cover up feelings of helplessness and loss. Inside, we feel exposed and defenseless, adrift in a stormy sea of emotions. Yet, our only way of reasserting control is to lash out like a cornered animal. This fury is often a coded way of admitting our pain, even though it is a very indirect way to communicate our distress. The rage may cover over a wound so deep that we can't bring ourselves to admit how much we hurt. 3. The tendency to go cold. Finally, there's the tendency to go cold and distant. Instead of admitting that we care and that we've been hurt, it can be easier to act as if we don't care at all. In moments of pain, we might build a fortress of indifference around ourselves, insisting that nothing really mattered, that we weren't affected, and that we don't need anyone anyway. This emotional numbing can be a defense mechanism to avoid the deep pain of feeling vulnerable. Over time, we might genuinely lose touch with our emotions, as the fear of being fully alive becomes too overwhelming to bear. In the long run, the inability to connect with our own feelings can rob us of the richness and vitality of human experience. The path to emotional maturity. The three responses, sulking, fury, and coldness, highlight the importance of three key markers of emotional maturity. These markers are communication, trust, and vulnerability, and they are essential for healthy emotional growth. Let's explore them in more detail. Communication, the power to explain. One of the hallmarks of emotional maturity is the ability to communicate our feelings clearly. It sounds simple, But in practice, it's one of the most challenging tasks we face. When someone upsets us, the mature response is to find a way to calmly and accurately describe why we are hurt. It requires faith in our ability to articulate our emotions, and a belief that we are not weak or inadequate for feeling the way we do. Instead of expecting others to read our minds, we learn to trust that, with the right words, we can make ourselves understood. This involves taking the risk of revealing our emotional state without shame and inviting the other person to understand and respond. Trust. The capacity to stay calm. The mature individual has an inherent sense of self-worth that allows them to remain calm in the face of emotional setbacks. This doesn't mean they don't feel hurt, but they possess an inner resilience that prevents them from reacting with immediate, overwhelming rage. They understand that strong self-assertion is always an option if necessary, but they choose to exercise patience and give the benefit of the doubt to others. This kind of maturity comes from a solid foundation of self-esteem, an understanding that we are not inherently flawed or deserving of scorn, even if someone has hurt us. Vulnerability, the courage to be open. The mature person has also learned that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength. They accept that being close to others will inevitably lead to moments of pain, and they are not afraid to show their emotional wounds. They have made peace with the fact that no relationship is immune to hurt, and they possess the courage to openly acknowledge their needs and desires. This doesn't mean they are naive or reckless, but rather that they have developed a healthy relationship with their own imperfections. They are willing to say, "I'm hurt," or "I need help," without fear of losing their dignity. The three cardinal virtues of emotional maturity. These three markers, communication, trust, and vulnerability, represent the core virtues of emotional maturity. Some of us were fortunate to develop these traits naturally during a nurturing and emotionally intelligent childhood. For others, however, this wasn't the case, and we may now face the task of learning them as adults. The difference is similar to growing up speaking a native language versus learning one as an adult. For those of us who didn't have the emotional equivalent of a fluent upbringing, it can feel like we are starting from scratch. But there is no shame in our lack of fluency. It is not our fault if we were not exposed to emotionally mature behavior early in life. If half of us weren't raised in emotionally literate households, it simply means that we might need to go back to school as adults and begin the learning process anew. Like acquiring any complex skill, becoming emotionally mature requires dedication, patience, and practice. We might need to spend 5,000 to 10,000 hours in thoughtful reflection, therapy, and mindful interaction, developing the grammar of emotional maturity step by step. Tools for growth. One way to track our progress in this area is to use what we might call an emotional barometer. This is a simple mental tool that helps us gauge our emotional responses to challenging situations and provides a clearer understanding of our emotional state. By regularly checking in with ourselves, we can start to identify patterns in our reactions and make conscious efforts to respond in more mature ways.